Hey there, my name is Jason Bradley. You may recognize my voice from such places as the Community Solutions Podcast, which, by the way, you're listening to now. Before we begin, can I bend your ear for just a moment? We want to bring you the very best in quality and information each week. You can help us achieve that level of greatness. If you sell something, want to announce something, or try to convince others to vote for you, consider advertising on the Community Solutions Podcast. You can email us at commsolutionsmn@gmail.com, and we'd love to help you tell everyone about what you do. Once again, that's commsolutionsmn@gmail.com. commsolutionsmn@gmail.com. Let us be your solution to increase sales. We thank you ahead of time for your consideration. Okay, enough yammering. On with the show. We are the energy. We are the same as you. Take everything you need. We are the answer to the broken, breaking through. Take everything from me. We are the Community Solutions Podcast. Here, coming at you, yet another week, episode 23. Oh boy.
Boy, I'll tell you what, my thoughts exactly. How was it you thinking? What were you saying when I was thinking?
We've just been doing this so long, almost 10 years now, that we're like, you know how married people get when they're together forever, they start completing each other's sentences.
Right.
We're not quite like that, but we think on the same vein, because we've been together long enough doing this that we just know what's coming next.
A little Laurel and Hardy.
Yeah.
Bang, 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 the slapstick.
That's it. Abbott and Costello, you name it.
I don't know about them, but I read history.
I am Jason Bradley. Always with me is Andrew Richter.
It's a pleasure to be back yet again.
Oh, boy. Busy day, busy week, busy month. I tell you, things are happening at a local level. Things are happening with Community Solutions Minnesota. And it's getting to be that time of year, Andrew, where we watch cities kind of fumble and scramble through putting together a preliminary budget, and a lot of people don't know what the process is, and a lot of people don't care, but you should, because this is how they decide how much money you're going to pay every month, every year, however you pay your taxes. So we thought we would take a little time, explain the different types of budgeting, explain kind of the timeline that Minnesota has set up for cities to do their budgeting on. And I think that by the end of this, you're going to be well versed in it. I know we've done a show before on the budget versus the comprehensive annual financial report. This is a little more in-depth on budget than even we went then. So if you heard that show, it's not a repeat. Don't tune out.
Yeah, we do 52 weeks a year here. We don't have repeats.
That's right.
Always on call here. Well, let me start this by saying that what we're going to talk about here, as far as the budget process, applies to all municipalities in the state of Minnesota.
Yes.
So that's cities, school district, park district, county level. They all have to follow the same rules and guidelines that have been laid down by our Lord and Masters in St. Paul. I'm just going to quickly explain the process, and we'll get into the minutia in a minute.
Okay.
Basically, what happens is, by September 30th, state law states that the municipality, no matter what it is, has to have what's called a preliminary budget maximum levy turned into their county, because the county is the tax, as we've talked about before. They are the property tax collector in Minnesota. They collect all the money, and it gets spread out to whoever the heck it's supposed to go to. So that has to be turned in by September 30th. So the budget, and that is a max levy. Now, they don't have to finalize a budget until December 31st.
Right.
So when you get that statement in November, that everybody will get it this November, that is the preliminary maximum max that the budget can be
Right. You can
raised
tax
to.
less. You can't tax more.
Right, exactly. It can go down. Usually it goes down by like 0.0006 or something. The preliminary levy is always pretty close to where they end up. But not until December 31st does it actually have to be finalized. And when they turn in the max levy, they have to set what's called a truth in taxation hearing, which to me is a contradiction in terms. But and that's typically their first meeting in December. They can pull that back.
Right.
I've seen that happen where they waited until December 20 something, like right before Christmas. Not the best time, I guess, to pass something when most people aren't looking. But
Merry Christmas!
Yeah, Merry Christmas. You got 0.001 reduction, and then that has to be turned in. So then, when you get your actual property tax statement for the year, which comes usually by state law requires you have to have it by March 15th for what's called the May payment. Now, if you escrow, you don't physically make that payment. I mean, you don't make it one time in May. It's coming out bit by bit.
Right.
But that will come in March. That's the finalized thing. So that's and that is set down by state law. That is not something that the cities dreamed up. I don't know if they dreamed it up. They may have lobbied for it, for all I know. But that's the law as it stands, like it or not. And what's going on right now, August is always the busy budget month. Unfortunately, most cities take kind of I don't like to call it a fast track approach to the budget, but to me, you can't, in a couple of work sessions, you can't dissect the budget. It's impossible. I think it's something that requires a lot more time. I think cities should start this process, and counties and other governments as well. I mean, think about Hennepin County has nearly a $2 billion budget. I don't know how they can do that in a couple of meetings, but they should be talking about it March, April, May. I mean, they really should be setting guidelines way before crunch time. Because usually what happens, and it's right around this time, is there'll be a big hubbub. Big meeting with all the department head honchos who all go on and on about how they can't live without more body armor, more pencils in the office, and you can't cut this department. If you're going to cut something, you can't cut us. We're so essential to this or that. And there's other things that complicate it, like joint powers, which some cities have and some cities don't have. If you're in a joint powers agreement, that section of the budget has to be approved by both or everybody who's involved in that. If we want to be crystal-centric, you have the backup water supply of New Hope, Golden Valley's Crystal, as well as West Metro Fire. So there are other things that can make it bigger than just the city. And then usually they kind of stare at the budget till they can't see a forest in the trees, and then largely pass closely to what staff, quote, recommends. Now, there's some caveats to that. City councils are supposed to be, and I say supposed to be because I see this happening in some cities and I see this happening in in some cities. They're supposed to be giving parameters to staff. They're supposed to be giving directives to staff, and that's supposed to be taken into account when the budget comes. For example, a directive might come down, we want to keep our service level about where it's at, but we don't want any more. That should be reflected in the recommended budget.
Yes.
Not that. If you get that directive, a 10% increase should not be anywhere in a recommendation.
Correct.
You might see we want to phase out something. When somebody retires, we don't want to replace them, or we want to contract out something. Those things should be reflected in a budget recommendation. Quite frankly, I don't think city staff should be making a recommendation. That's just me.
Right.
I think the council should be leading the discussion, and often what you'll find is it's the other way around.
Yes.
So,
well, that's the case across the board, whether it's ordinances, whether it's charter changes, whether it's that seems to be
garbage hauling, whether it's franchise fees.
It's usually the staff leading the council around by the ring in the nose. It is interesting that you bring that up. I mean, city staff it should be serving at the pleasure of the council. The council should be the ones who say, here's the direction we want the city to go in. It's up to you now, staff, to go and make your department fit within our vision.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what would happen anywhere in the workplace, wouldn't it?
Yes.
I mean, the employees aren't leading the bosses.
Here's our company goals.
Yeah. I mean, and a good proactive council will do that.
Right.
But I think a lot of councils are Johnny-come-latelys and don't want to ruffle feathers and don't understand their role as council members, and maybe are using the office to get somewhere else or something like that, or don't put in their own research or their own time. And I think a lack of that has been a big problem. Some people who are there for their fourth or fifth term, they're not going to. If they were going to do something, they'd have done it by then.
Well, and make no mistake about it, on the other side of the coin, there are also staff members who are like, I was here before you, I will be here after you.
Yeah.
I have a long-term vision for this department or this city or this whatever. We're going to go in that direction, and I'm just going to put it out there, and I know you'll accept it because you don't ever say anything.
Yeah, now stop talking about New Hope. Quit talking about New Hope. A great city where the inmates run the asylum. And I think, again, it's where the city manager position becomes so important. Because in reality, in most cities, and I don't know this is true everywhere, the city, same thing with like a superintendent in the school districts, they're the only people that are directly employed by the school board or the city council. But their job is to make sure everybody else does their job.
Right.
And if the city manager isn't doing that, that is grounds for dismissal.
Yep.
I mean, I have to say that. If I'm the owner of a baseball team and I hire a general manager to run the team with my vision, I own the team, okay? And I'm saying, look, this is the kind of team I want. Here's the money you have to spend. I'm not going to micromanage it, but these are this. You don't get me the results I want. Guess what? That guy's now doing a radio show with, walking around with a tape recorder, okay?
Absolutely.
So, it's, to me, the same thing applies here. But again, I don't think you have a lot of city councils that are proactive in that. I don't think you have a lot of them that even really have a vision for where they want to take a city.
No, and that's the thing. I mean, and with city managers, you have these professional organizations, you have college courses that are teaching them, here's the things you need to go do in your city. These are the trends in other cities. And so
they go to their workshops.
They come out feeling empowered. I'm not saying anything bad about the city managers. It's the people who train them, that they come out and they feel like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to go out and push for these changes.
Right. And we see that everywhere. I mean, it's why you see, as we've talked about, cities all doing the same thing. Well, it's like they're all in a room and they're all giraffes. They all don't know they're giraffes. I mean, I'm just,
Okay. I'm following you.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the way it is. They all don't know the difference anymore.
Right.
And again, like I said, it takes a strong, persistent mayor and council majority to impose. I mean, impose is the wrong word. Do their jobs is what I would call it, to get those changes made. And with the budgets, I mean, I've seen wacky budget meetings. I've watched wacky ones on Hennepin County or on Channel 6. The state of Minnesota, for example, talk about dysfunctional and just a bunch of little kids running around. And the state of Minnesota, and you and I talked off air, they don't even follow their own rules.
No.
I mean, municipalities have to do all of their negotiating in public. The state dicks around for 5 months at a session and then goes behind closed doors, and all of a sudden there's a deal, and you don't know how it was reached or anything. I mean, but municipalities can't do that. I still think they do to a certain extent.
Oh, yeah.
As we've talked about previously, about how they kind of, one bird talks to another. But the wacky part of it is I have seen council meetings, and I won't mention names, West Metro Fire, where literally they're talking about $50 on a budget line or something. And I've seen entire departments hardly get scrutinized.
Yeah.
I've seen heads of departments get almost whatever they want. I've seen the attitude taken, and I think, like I've said, I think there's pros and cons to this. Of, look, our job is to figure out the money, not tell you how to spend it, which is an interesting way to go. I think there's a few drawbacks to it, but I've seen, we're going to say yes to these three things and no to these. I mean, I've seen all different variations that you could possibly have about how the meal gets made, if you want to call it that. So it's goofy, and it's I think it's overall we just have a bad system of how we do this. And there's a lot I would do to change it, which we'll get into. But the way it stands right now, your city may scrutinize, a $5 item and let $1 million thing just go. Your city may take more of a hands-off approach that, it's not my job to tell the fire chief what fire trucks to buy. I'm just going to work on the budget. You'll see an in-between done on that. You'll see councils that stand there, just nod their head, and don't really, seeming like they're not getting it, if you will.
Right.
I think the budget is something that new council people have a hard time grasping and getting, because it's so complex. Money is going in and out of so many funds. I think a lot of council people really struggle with this process.
Right, and so to help you all out, I think maybe where we should start here is explaining what is or is not in a budget, because I think that's going to help all of you to know what to expect and what you're looking for. League of Minnesota Cities breaks it down in three ways. There's governmental funds, which are used to finance most governmental services and based on tax revenues, special assessments, or issuing debt. The city's general fund, debt service funds to pay off bonds, capital project funds are examples of governmental funds. Proprietary funds, which are financing for governmental activities operating like a private business. For example, water and sewer utilities, electrical utilities, or municipal liquor stores. Service charges usually provide most of these funds. And then fiduciary funds, trust and agency funds used to account for assets a city holds in a trustee capacity or as an agent. For example, pension funds. Fiduciary funds cannot be used to support the city's own programs. So those are the three ways that they break it down, and those are a lot of what you will see in these financial documents. But what actually are you going to see in a budget?
Well, let me jump in there.
Yeah.
What you're going to see in the budget is operational costs.
Right.
That's what they're trying to say there, but they can't say it simply. It will be day-to-day operations and or interest payments, things like that. Yep. So, for example, I don't mean to interrupt you, but let me
that's good. That's good.
Street maintenance, for example. If you fill a pothole, put a little slab on a sidewalk, put gas in the trucks, that's operations.
Yes.
Reconstructing a street will be in the comprehensive annual financial report. That's not an operational cost. It's a capital cost. So that's what you will see and what you won't see. So, for example, costs associated with keeping City Hall open. The electricity, the copy paper, the pencils and pens.
All the whiteout that they use.
All the whiteout. Their internet service. Bonds to pay for building the new building? No, that won't be in the budget. So that's That's a simpler way of saying, and yes, they're right. You're going to find a street maintenance fund. You're going to find the general fund. You're going to find, if you receive local government aid, it will be worded differently. Intergovernmental revenue, I think they call that. They talked about fiduciary. That's the para here in Minnesota.
Right.
Public employee retirement accounts. The city has to contribute to that.
Yeah.
And that is operational. That's doing payroll.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing, the day-to-day stuff is what you're going to see in a budget.
And for you to come away and say, okay, I see what the city's proposing, I see what the school district's proposing, those are the taxes that I'm going to pay. Wrong. They're not going to put in special assessments. They're not going to put in franchise fees. They're not going to put in bond payments like you talked about. So there are a number of taxes over and above what you will see on your tax statement.
And remember, bonds are tricky.
Right.
Because the debt service is on the budget.
Yes.
The principal is on the comprehensive annual financial report.
Exactly.
So it's screwy both ways. You're kind of paying, the part that goes to the banker comes out of the budget. The actual cost of the project is out of the CAFR and whatever capital improvement fund that they've got stashed away somewhere. Water works the same way. A project is not done with the water fund.
Right.
You have your operational and then you have your capital. So that's what makes it so hard to get a handle on where the hell your money's going, because there's 900 different places it ends up. So, yeah.
So I just think that was really important for people to understand, because it's not black and white. Things get split all the time, and there are many taxes that you pay to your local entities that do not show up on your tax statement.
Well, and keep in mind, too, that most entities have more than one levy.
Yes.
Hennepin County has 3. District 281 has 2.
Yep.
City of Crystal has 3. They used to have 4, but the pool bonds have expired or are about to expire or something. But they were voted in the 90s. So you're the Three Rivers Park District has 2 because they have bonding authority.
Yeah.
So there's the Met Council, that's part of your property taxes here in the Northwest Metro or anywhere in the Metro. So you have 10, 11 different places where your money is actually being siphoned, which is another thing that's hard to grasp.
Right.
And again, I will say this, the state has contributed to this. I mean, the state auditor's office has cities do an auditor's report every June 30th. Coincides with the state biennium. The state, with school districts, has made them separate their capital costs. It's called deferred maintenance, and their budget. So they're not necessarily doing all of this by choice. They have to do it a certain way that the auditor's office has their own way they want something, and they have to submit something else to the county. So it's not, I can't blame them completely, although they could sure do a lot to reduce the size of government or make these financial documents not look like they're Greek or Swahili or Chippewa Indian or whatever. I can't, very, very difficult things to understand. I mean, it's very hard. I think it should be easier. I think they're complex on purpose. That's my view. I think it's to make all of us look like we're so stupid we can't figure out where our money's going.
Well, it's a lot easier to spend money on what you want to spend money on if people don't understand it.
Yeah.
It
was a better way of saying what I said. Yeah.
Well, and there's truth to that. It's like, no, it's all transparent. We put it out there. You put it out in 2 different documents. You put it into 13 different funds, 20 different funds. You have things come in here and go out there, and you collect these taxes that aren't on the levy, and you collect the levy, and you have 3 levies, and you see that there is such a disservice, I think, being done to the taxpayer, and that if you could find all of your information in one place with a bottom line, I mean, that's really all they need to know is I'm paying this much total, and I think that would open a lot of people's eyes.
Yeah, but, it's needlessly complex. It's totally needless.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, I think it's going to take some changes in state law to make some of the changes that we'd like to see.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, when you look in a budget, I mean, on the expense side of an operating budget, the biggest cost is people.
Mm-hmm.
It's people heavy. In some municipalities, particularly a school district, employee salaries, wages, benefits, retirement, whatever, are going to be 80+% of the cost. I mean, 80+%. I don't think it's that much in a city, but it's up there. Mm-hmm. And the thing about it is, personnel is the easiest thing they can control. Mm-hmm. If you think about it, because you can't turn the lights off, you can't shut the water off, you can't turn the cable off, or the internet off, you can't shut the phones down. Okay, so some of those expenses are just going to be there. Mm-hmm. Personnel, size of government, is probably the biggest variable that they can control.
Right.
Yet it's probably the one that I feel everybody is so touchy about going after. Mm-hmm. And whether that's done through attrition, through reorganization, through contracting out, which has gotten a bad name. I call it putting in the private sector.
Yeah.
Letting the private sector do something. Personnel is where the money is largely going. It's largely going into the pockets of employees. Now, let me say that. I don't hate people who work for government. Mm-hmm. That's a myth about people who are who we are politically. Mm-hmm. I have nothing against anybody earning an honest living, but the size of government seems to stay the same and or grow regardless of any other economic forces. I feel like government thinks that they're insulated from anything, and it's part of what we talk about with how we budget, because there's two ways to budget. Mm-hmm. One that's called zero-based.
Yep.
One that's called baseline.
Yes.
Then let's explain.
Perfect.
Okay. Baseline budgeting is where your beginning point is whatever you previously had. Mm-hmm. Let me give an example. Our police department has 41 employees.
Yes.
So the budget starts with 41 employees. Mm-hmm. Okay. Zero-based budgeting, guess what we start with? None. You don't have any employees right now. So
that's great.
And so you start, we need X amount of police officers. We need a police chief, need somebody in charge. You need, and you work your way up. Mm-hmm. And you start with the things the city's most responsible for, whether that's police and fire, then it probably becomes roads, then maybe parks after that. And if there's any money left over, you fund the things you desire.
Right. But
baseline budgeting, and that's the track almost everybody takes. The police chief will walk into that budget. We got 40 officers. I have to have every one of them. Mm-hmm. That's where the negotiating starts.
Yep.
So you're negotiating whether to have 40 or 41. Mm-hmm. So I think the first change that has to be made, we got to go to zero-based budgeting.
Right.
Now, that would take a whole host of other changes to happen.
It would.
Because when I talk about a max levy, and Jay, you know this as well as anybody, you're talking about what you're going to spend.
Yes.
So what has to start, and we do the same thing at the state level. Mm-hmm. The state, we got a $45 billion. Well, you don't have $45 billion. Oh, well, then we have to go get it now.
Right. I learned my story about baseline budgeting early on. I went to a private college, College of St. Scholastica up in Duluth. I'd founded a group that InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. They didn't have one up there, and I figured out what my budget was for the year as an official group of the college. They gave us a budget, and I got to the end of the year, and I was told, all right, when you're figuring your budget out for next year, you need to spend all of your money this year so that you can make a case for having just as much or more money next year. If you don't spend all your money this year, you will not get as much next year. That was eye-opening for me, because I was like, oh, that doesn't seem right. What if I need more, and I don't need as much this year? You know, and that
starts.
Absolutely. And so you learn at a young age.
There's an incentive to go out there and spend it.
Spend it so you can ask for that and more if needed next year.
Yes. I mean, I went into this, I don't know if I should disclose this, but when I worked in the uniform industry, police and fire were some of our clients. You'd get a phone call in December, oh, I got to spend $4,000, even though it wasn't really needed. I got to spend it. I need it billed right now. So you'd get a call December 28th that somebody had $4,000 to spend, and it was I was appalled by it. Like, what do you mean? What do you mean you have $4,000 to spend? You don't need it,
right?
But they're protecting their baseline so that. Exactly what you said. Oh, well, you didn't spend it last year, so you don't get it now.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, you do see that. It does happen. I don't care what they say. They're lying. It does happen. And I'll tell you what, it's where the revenue side of the budget has to be figured out first. And we have a backwards process here in the state of Minnesota. That you figure out what you want to spend, then you figure out how you're going to get it. And I think until that gets lifted, until that stops, you're never going to see zero-based budgeting.
Right.
Because there's no incentive to spend less. Because then the baseline is down. Now, I'll tell you what, at the state level, it's twice as bad.
Oh, yes.
Because there's automatic increases built into the formulas for K-12, LGA, for other kinds of things. So when they talk about a budget deficit, what they're talking about is the projected increase. No. Everybody got what they were promised. It's the formula says it's supposed to go up 2% every biennium. Well, it went up 1.7. Well, that's a cut in the minds of the people who do baseline budgeting. And I do think local government kind of has the same mentality. They don't call it that. They don't have automatic increases built in. But, they end up pretty much getting them anyhow, especially in union negotiations.
Right.
Because whether you're a union employee or a non-union employee, usually you get the same thing. The police union will work out a 1.5% increase, so then the kid working the warming house will get a 1.5% increase too.
Yeah.
It's not performance-based.
No.
It's uniformity.
But that's a great point. And bringing back, you talk about like a warming house, or you talk about a municipal golf course, or you talk about a municipal liquor store. And we talked earlier about proprietary funds, and that's the cost of running that quote-unquote business, right, that the city really shouldn't be in the first place. But then you've got all the people costs on top of that.
Absolutely.
Which is different. And do you remember what it was? Plymouth a while ago was hiring somebody for one of their municipal businesses, and they were looking to hire somebody at $95,000, a manager. Which is crazy to me that they would think about spending that much taxpayer money on something that probably doesn't make money to begin with.
Well, and I remember New Hope at one point wanted to hire a police officer just to focus on handing out as many citations as possible. And their justification was that the amount of citations they would hand out would pay for the position that they had.
Well, that makes me want to avoid New Hope like the plague.
Yeah, no kidding.
Oh.
I mean, Dukes of Hazzard, it does exist. They're going to hire Roscoe P. Coltrane to go out there and ticket people for jaywalking, and then that money is used to fund him.
Oh.
I mean, they had it right in the front of their website. I'd have to look it up. I'm pretty sure I did a piece on it a few years ago, but it was just blatant, right out there. And the amount of, I'll get into something too, this is a little minutia, but so many departments are so top heavy. I mean, you look at a police department and, you have a chief and a deputy and lieutenants and sergeants and there's so many, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't have supervision or that, I think police officers need something to work towards, and you have a detective and you have all that, but, I think when you have half the staff in some sort of supervisor capacity, you'd never see that out in the real world. No. Ever would you see that?
No. I mean, if you have like 22 police officers, you really don't need 2 lieutenants. I mean, you could have a chief and a lieutenant.
But it's like a baseball team having 25 players and 20 coaches.
Right.
I mean, no, you don't. You got 5 coaches and you got 25 ball players.
Right.
And to me, I don't know that even the position of deputy chief is, for smaller cities, is pretty questionable. I mean, you
can your lieutenant can't step up for a day.
Why can't the lieutenant be the deputy chief in waiting or in if it's kind of like at work, you might have somebody who kind of is in charge when somebody isn't there. And I don't understand why nobody sort of changes the ladder. It's kind of like the military. You've got too many chiefs and not enough Indians, and so they are very top heavy. There's a lot of cities with, with a lot of, it would all be classified as administration, which would be finance, city manager, assistant city manager, HR, payroll, tech specialist, billing supervisor, building code. Well, that would probably be in community development. But I think that the model of how government is in a lot of cities has been unchanged for 30, 40, 50 years, kind of like a school district. It's kind of still run the way it was run 50 years ago, and it hasn't adapted to changes in these cities not growing anymore, or the need for something is gone now that maybe was there 20 years ago. So I think that an overhaul, now how that happens is complicated, because whether the council should be forcing those changes or reducing the budgets or changing policy. It's kind of all of those things, all those tools they have at their disposal.
And you bring up an interesting point with all of this. I mean, thinking about it from like a school board point of view, say in Robbinsdale School District, where they close a couple of schools and they hang on to them, and then it's like, well, let's repurpose that and reopen that. They don't want to change their budget. They don't want to start spending less money, which means they didn't need the referendum that they just billed you for, and they're thinking about putting a new one out there in 2 years and 4 years and 6 years. So we've got to reopen those schools. We've got to repurpose things. We've got to use them. We've got to be spending the money. So they just kind of float around. Anyone with a solid business sense would say, we don't need this school. Let's sell it off. Even if it's to a charter school, we're just going to be the best school district we can be, and we'll beat their pants off. But no, you don't get that in public schools, and so they hang on to the property, and then we need to figure out something to do with it. They reopen the school, and it's just a vicious cycle.
Right, and remember, reopening a property is not as simple as it sounds.
Right.
You got a school that's been dead for 20 years. It's millions of dollars to repair or replace completely. So it's a process that, takes 20, 30 years ultimately to pay for. Mm-hmm. So it's not a short-term thing. It's more of a long-term thing that, it can't be, and I think you're right that we have money, now we have to justify it. Mm-hmm. And I think school districts are a good example of where they come up with new ways to do the same thing. So, I mean, I don't know. We've done a podcast on education where we talked about what we'd fix there, which is a lot.
Yes. We scratched the surface. I think there's far more.
I think we've barely scratched the surface. But, to me, school districts have gotten what they've had coming. They've advocated for most of the things they complain about. So it's kind of hard to feel too sorry for them. And I think some cases cities work the same way. I think they've whined and complained about some things. They want the state to get involved and then they don't, but there's no consistency to it. So I think they've gotten in their own boat for their own reasons. But getting back to the budget thing, there are some cities that have taken to doing a 2-year budget.
Interesting,
and it is interesting. Now I should say that they have to pass a levy each year, no matter what. Crystal's a city that's considered going to a 2-year. Brooklyn Park's actually done it. I don't know of any other cities immediately around here, but your budget can be changed, it can be amended, things can happen to it. But the thinking behind it is you have the big, kind of like the state does it. You have the budget year, and you have everything else kind of in the second year. That's kind of the way the state works. So it's an interesting approach to get the budget taken care of, and everybody for 2 years knows what's going to happen, rather than on a year-by-year basis. Again, there's some drawbacks to that. Things like local government aid can change, whether your city's a net receiver of that or a net payer. There's not much consistency to that around here. It's based on a formula and 200 different things that I don't even want to get into. So you have to anticipate some things that are going to happen, especially in the areas of like permits and licensing. I think they could fall short in that second year. I think it's hard to predict that 2 years in the future. But you can avoid the constant bog down of the budget, which really consumes the council the second half of a year.
Well, and that's the way that the state of Minnesota does it. I mean, you have the budget one year, you have the bonding the next year, and the budget and then the bonding. So you're really setting something up for 2 years.
And the reform year, some people call it.
Yeah.
The reforms come out the second year. Numbers come out the first year. So, there are... I think you could do employee contracts on a 2-year basis instead of a 1-year basis, and not have that fight every single year. School districts often do a 2-year because they know they're funding from the state on a 2-year basis. So some of them have adopted a 2-year budget plan. Like I said, they still have to pass a levy. They still have to hold a truth and taxation hearing. They still have to pass that in September. And again, it doesn't resolve them of that. But it's an approach, I think, that should be considered by municipalities everywhere. They should be thinking, why don't we work this out for 2 years instead of 1, and just repeat this cycle every single year. And the budget, like I said, it can be amended. They can change it. It's not set in stone. The maximums are. But you pass that in a levy anyway. So it is a little bit flexible. But ultimately, I'm one that thinks that if you can't, if you're deciding your expenses first, it's very hard to make changes. It's just really difficult. If you're not concentrating on what you have rather than what you don't have, that's a problem.
Yes.
So I don't know that that's the right way to do it. But, I'm encouraged that cities are thinking differently and maybe thinking outside the box a little bit.
Wish they were thinking outside the box, like, let's spend less money.
Well, I mean, there are some... The problem is that because some things have happened in the past few years around here that are one could see as a positive. Contracting out busing here in District 281.
Right.
Unfortunately, it was really done so they could just spend in other areas. It wasn't with an idea of having less government.
Right.
There's pros and cons to doing the busing that way. I mean, I have to admit, I knew people who were bus drivers. A couple of them were friends of mine. I was, wasn't pleasant to see what they went through, but some of them got nice packages, so it wasn't all for nothing. But whether it's being done to actually reduce the size of government or not, contracting out can be something that, payroll, for example, it can be contracted out. City of Crystal, our home base, is contracted out their finance department. They're letting...
It's a great move.
I think it's a great move, too, because I think it's... To get financial advice from people who aren't employees is essential.
Absolutely.
Legal advice has been contracted out by almost all cities now. Minneapolis and St. Paul might not, but you hire a firm, they loan you out somebody, you use them as much or as little as you want to. You sign a 1-year contract or a 2-year contract, and you review the services at the end. So that's, I think you need some legal advice. I think it's important. God knows there's lawyers working on another side everywhere. So, I think that's a legitimate thing. But cities have gone to, there's really not a city attorney. There's a city firm that is loaning you an attorney. So it's another way to control that. I think reducing what Crystal did with the housing inspections. You don't need to pay somebody to do that. It's offset by not having the fee coming in. So you've reducing what you're doing, you're reducing an employee. That's the way to cut government. It's not to take some governments would take that and spend it somewhere else, Hennepin County. So, but again, that process, I still think until we have it backwards and until we have zero-based budgeting, the big changes like that aren't going to happen. So, whether that's at whatever level, the state, they've been talking about it and talking about it and talking about it. Ultimately, it never happens, and I don't think it will. I mean, I'm just a pessimist about it. I hear the rhetoric about it. I don't see anybody doing anything about it. If you're part of a government agency, you have no incentive to change that. You can spend, and nobody's going to, as we said before, you get the phone call that you've got $5,000 left and you got to spend it, or else you're not getting it next year.
Right.
What's the incentive then to reduce that? None.
Exactly.
So, but yes, you're going to see. I mean, I think the point of this whole thing is to see what's going on right now. I guarantee you, your city, your school board, your county is in budget talks right now.
They need to be, yes.
Yeah, and believe me, it is. Watching paint dry is more exciting. Or whatever, reruns of Night Court. I don't know. They're more exciting than budget talks. But I'll tell you, they're pretty important. And I'll tell you what else is important. And I'm going to change the subject a little bit. The comprehensive annual financial reports, which all were taken care of by June 30th, they should all be posted now at the auditor's office. I think they all have to be, I don't recall what state statute it is, but I think they should all be updated now.
They should be.
There. Even though we have an auditor who's financed by the agencies she's supposed to be auditing. So I don't know if how good they are at it right now, but your new financial report should be available to be seen there as far as which is the assets and liabilities, the total financial picture, not just the operating costs.
Right. So you want to get your hands on that. And most cities put them on their website. Sometimes you might have to go down to City Hall and get one.
Yeah.
But
they don't do a great job updating that either.
Oh, no.
I've gone to some city websites where the last couple aren't there.
Mm-hmm.
So it may be there, it may not be there. Ultimately, it should be at the auditor's office because they had to pass one by June 30th.
Right.
To coincide with the biennium.
So make sure that you get your hands on that. Start looking through it. I know it'll look confusing because, the first time that we looked at one, our eyes got as big as saucers, and we were like, are you serious? That's what they're spending? That's the money they're bringing in?
Yeah, and that's what they own.
Mm-hmm.
Acquisitions, which were real big under the previous regime, acquiring property and things
Mm-hmm.
like that. And it was eye-opening. And it all coincided with our confusion over assessments. And I remember that being the big thing, I don't remember what phase we were on. Phase 9 maybe at the time. But I was like looking, well, where is that? I can't find that in the budget.
Mm-hmm.
It's a $6 million project, and I don't see it. And of course it wasn't there. It was somewhere else. So, that's the you want to call it a gimmick, call it a gimmick.
Mm-hmm.
Put whatever label you want on it. But just understand that, number one, whatever the preliminary budget is going to be damn close to what it ends up being.
Mm-hmm.
And, see if you've got a city council what's their approach to the budget?
Mm-hmm.
Are they the kind of people that are going to argue over a snow cone on the budget, or are they big picture people? Are they more hands off? Are they, as whatever staff recommends, are they getting? It's a little different everywhere, I think.
It is, and it's one of the things I think that is still a little different everywhere, but it's still the same in that we don't see people going to a zero budgeting approach. We still see the baseline budgeting everywhere. We still see let's grab as much cash as we can to get our projects done. Not everybody's using special assessments for things, but a lot of people are. Franchise fees are getting more and more popular to keep money off of the budget. So these are the things that you got to look out for, because it'll give you a total picture of not just what they're asking from you, but what they're taking from you.
Yeah, and I'd say another thing, read that property tax statement.
Mm-hmm.
See how much money is going everywhere.
Mm-hmm. And that's if you're in greater Minnesota or in the metro. There are a number of places, because as we know, out in greater Minnesota, you're funding not only your city or township, your county, but also your regional government and
your watershed. I remember when I lived in Crystal, I think I counted 11 different places that my money was going.
Huh.
Because you had 3 levies on Crystal,
Mm-hmm.
you had 3 on Hennepin County, you had 2 at the school district, plus the park district. I was in the Shingle Creek watershed, as you are, and the Met Council. So I think I had...
there also would have been the Hennepin County Railroad Authority.
Right, I counted that.
Okay, that's part of the... Okay.
In fact, the Three Rivers Park District might have had 2 because they have bonding authority.
Okay.
So, you look at that and, it's right there, but it's not right there.
Right.
It's there, but it isn't. So it certainly is something that, I could write a book on how to change it.
Yeah.
Literally, we write a book on what's, and again, it all comes back to size and scope of government.
Mm-hmm.
That really is what we're arguing about, is government is so big, so vast, it's in every nook and cranny of our lives. Are we shocked that the budget and the comprehensive annual financial report in a city of 20,000 people is so complicated?
No, obviously, it's everywhere.
And your state government is intertwined with it. In some cases, federal government is intertwined with it. Even at a local community block grant, where does that come from? It comes from the what we talked about in one of our previous shows of the housing department, HUD. And whether that's LGA, remember there's a lot of parts to LGA. There's the public employee, there's para, there's the big LGA, but there's also Municipal Street Aid, MSA, which is another program that you may you may receive funds from. It's all under that banner of intergovernmental revenue.
Yes.
So, the budget is a big, massive thing. I'd like to see all the money just in a room. You know what I mean? I'll lay it all out there and we'll divvy it up like Monopoly. That's what I'd like to see.
Well, it's going in that direction. It'll be worth about as much.
Well, maybe. That's another show.
Yes, it is. Oh, well, we can't thank you guys enough for joining us on this show. I hope you have a better understanding of what goes into a budget.
I hope we didn't make it worse.
Oh, how they plan it out, the different approaches to budgets. There is so much, and that's the thing. I mean, we could make it so much worse.
Right, and just remember, look for those meetings in September and December. And here's another caveat out there. One of the things City Council should be doing, why do they wait until the budget is done to hear from the public?
Because that's how they do everything.
Right. But why don't you hold the budget hearing in April? Say, instead of us telling us where our money's going, asking us where we would. Let's see a city survey, not saying, "Oh, do you like your services? Yes, fair, good." Let's see a city survey that breaks that down a little bit more.
Yeah. Do you think you pay too much for water? Do you think
I mean, a poll question: how much are you willing to pay for this? I mean, a poll question, a questionnaire. The questions are manipulated to get a certain answer. That's what I think.
Well, people like the city. Look at that.
Oh,
they say they want their city services
300 people filled it out, so everybody thinks the same thing.
Yeah.
I remember, I'll just share this quick. I remember when I ran for mayor, I remember the city survey that year, and there was one question that really caught me. It was, how much do you know about city government? And I think 6% said a lot.
Yeah.
And, it broke down after that. And remember Jim Adams, when he beat me, we talked about that, and he actually quoted this in his debate with Renee. Was, we're talking about a city survey where only 6 people think they know a lot. 6%. It's like, I'd like to talk to those 6%, see how they filled it out.
Yeah.
So it's tricky to watch these things because they'll ask questions designed to get a certain answer and then tout that as something wonderful. But what you're really doing is you're answering questions you already know the answer to. But when 6% of the people actually admit that they don't know much, then that kind of destroys the validity of the survey. It's like asking, all right, let's have a survey about being a neurosurgeon, and we have 2 doctors and 1,000 other people.
Yeah.
Well, the survey's invalid on its face.
Right.
So,
speaking of which, and let me just say this because we won't be doing our job otherwise, the city of Crystal recently did put out a city survey, and the former mayor, who used to use these surveys all the time to tout how wonderful the city was, told the people in her city, go fill it out as many times as possible to skew the results. You're fantastic. I
publicly call on her to get kicked off the Environmental Quality Commission for that.
I like that.
That is absolutely ridiculous. That is manipulating. She says horrible things about the people there all the time. That standard was applied to me, and it ought to be applied to her. If she had a drop of integrity, which she wouldn't know if it ran her over, she should not only be kicked off, she should actually step down, which she never will do. But I think she should be removed from that commission altogether. If you encourage people to falsify things like that, you are a piece of garbage and you have no business serving. You can go volunteer. You can go volunteer to clean the outhouse. You go do that. So, I mean, yeah.
Tell us how you really feel.
Yeah, well, sorry. It was
no, that's fine.
It's despicable conduct, but...
It is. Well, you expect anything less.
Considering the source, I'm not surprised whatsoever. I'm surprised she didn't go out and get 100 copies of it and bring it all to City Hall.
She's been filling them out since last Wednesday.
She's going from computer to computer to computer. The city has been notified about what she was doing, but it's no shock there. So we'll see if Crystal's surveys have any validity to them.
Oh boy!
I'd still ask different questions. Yeah, that's just me.
Oh, on that note, we want to thank each and every one of you for listening to us every week. And we love the questions we get. We love the stories we get. We love being alerted about what's happening in your cities. We've been able to step in and cut some stuff off and slow some things down. So it does help. Get a hold of us. Our email address is commsolutionsmn@gmail.com. That's commsolutionsmn@gmail.com. And let us know about what's going on around you. Let us know if you feel like running for something, if you want to get something going in your area. Also, stay in touch with our blog. That's where you'll get our podcasts, our articles, everything else. commsolutionsmn.com. And other than that, I think that we've had another really good show.
Absolutely.
So take care, and we will see you 1 week from today.
If I get too caught up